Welcome to Midnight Archives, a place where stories drift through the quiet hours, mysteries from history, forgotten moments, and gentle tales from the edge of the known. I'm glad you're here. Each night, we open the pages of a story, not to solve it, but to breathe it in. No dramatic tension, no sharp edges, just the slow unfolding of a mystery, like fog rolling in over calm waters. So, find a quiet place. Let your thoughts settle like leaves on a still pond. And together, let's drift into tonight's story. Let the ocean cradle you tonight as we drift gently into the fog-bound pages of one of the sea's oldest unsolved mysteries. The story of the Mary Celeste is a whisper across time, a lonely echo carried by wind and tide. She was found adrift in 1872, an empty vessel moving aimlessly across the Atlantic. No sign of life on board, only silence and questions. Who were they? What happened out there, beyond the reach of lighthouses, beyond the memory of waves? Come with me now. Close your eyes. Let the water carry us. Let the mystery unfold, softly and slowly. The Mary Celeste did not always bear that name. She began her life as the Amazon, built in the wooded harbors of Nova Scotia in 1861. She was a brigantine, proud and purposeful, with a solid oak hull, strong timbers, and white sails that yearned to be filled by ocean winds. She was made for trade, for journeys that lasted weeks, months, through storms and sunshine alike. But fate followed her closely. On her maiden voyage, her first captain fell ill and died suddenly at sea. There were collisions, repairs, owners who came and went. The Amazon was not blessed with calm waters. Eventually, she was sold, refitted, renamed. The Mary Celeste emerged from the shipyard, reborn and bound for new adventures. She was 103 feet long, 282 tons, a ship of promise. But promises on the sea are written in salt and vanish with the tide. In the autumn of 1872, the Mary Celeste was under the care of Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was a man of faith, quiet, thoughtful, respected. He had sailed since he was a boy, and the sea was as much a part of him as the sky or the stars. For this voyage, he brought his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. They would journey together from New York to Genoa, Italy, delivering a cargo of denatured alcohol. The crew was small, just 7 men, but each one handpicked by Briggs for his character and skill. First mate Albert Richardson, second in command, was steady and experienced. The rest, a mix of sailors from around the world, men who knew the language of ropes and canvas, of tide and wind. Before they departed, Briggs wrote a letter to his mother. "All is well," he said. The voyage is promising, but it would be his last letter. On November 5, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from Pier 50 on the East River in New York. The sky was calm, the sea forgiving. The ship moved slowly past Governor's Island and then out toward the open Atlantic. Behind her, the city shrank into mist. Before her, 3,000 miles of ocean waited. The cargo was 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, not dangerous in itself, but volatile and foul-smelling. Some say the crew disliked the cargo from the start. Others speak of tension before departure, minor illnesses, a feeling in the air, but ships sailed with less, and fear was a luxury not many sailors could afford. Captain Briggs prayed with his family before they left the harbor, a quiet ritual, a hopeful one. The Mary Celeste vanished into the horizon. She would not be seen again for nearly a month, and when she was empty. December 5, 1872. The Dei Grazia, a British brigantine, was making her way west across the mid-Atlantic. Captain David Morehouse stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the sea. He spotted something, a ship on the horizon, sails in disarray, course wandering, too slow, too strange. He knew the Mary Celeste. He had dined with Briggs in New York, just days before they both set sail. Now she drifted silently, with no signal, no reply, no sign of life. The crew of the Dei Grazia approached cautiously. They called out. No answer. Only the sound of waves and the creaking of empty timbers. A boarding party was sent, and what they found would become legend. The boarding party from the Dei Grazia stepped carefully onto the swaying deck of the Mary Celeste. Everything was quiet, too quiet. The sails were partly set, but some were torn and flapping loose. The rigging hung like tangled hair. The wheel moved lazily, untended. No one greeted them, no footsteps above or below. Only the sea lapping at the hull and the creak of wood under strain. The men called out. Again, nothing. They moved below deck, their boots thudding softly on the damp planks of the companionway. Still, no sign of the captain, no crew, no wife, no child. The Mary Celeste was deserted, but not wrecked, not broken, just abandoned. Below deck, the air was musty and carried the sharp scent of alcohol, but not spilled alcohol, just the faint vapor of its presence, sealed in barrels. The cargo was intact, every barrel accounted for. The ship's log was still in the mate's cabin. The last entry? 10 days earlier. Nothing unusual reported. Captain Briggs' cabin was tidy, his belongings untouched. A child's toys still rested on the bed. A sewing machine stood quietly beside a folded shawl. Breakfast had been prepared, partially eaten, then left. The lifeboat, however, was gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, no violence, just a ship left behind in the middle of the sea, with no clear reason why. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy. There was no major damage. A few missing planks in the stern rail, a loose rudder, some water in the hold, but nothing that would force a seasoned captain to abandon ship. Yet the lifeboat had been lowered. Ropes hung neatly where it had been secured. It seemed deliberate, but if they left on purpose, why leave a ship that floated, that still had food, water, sails, and hope? Captain Morehouse, puzzled but practical, decided to divide his men. He ordered one crew to sail the Dei Grazia and another to bring the Mary Celeste safely to Gibraltar. They would claim salvage, but they would also carry one of the strangest tales ever whispered across the oceans. It took nearly 2 weeks to bring the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar. The weather turned, and the ghost ship fought against wind and wave. She resisted, it seemed, or maybe it only felt that way. She was different now. The man sailing her, first mate Oliver Devoe, spoke of strange feelings, an unease. Some claimed to hear noises at night, soft knocks, footsteps, faint voices. Others dismissed it. Ships creak, minds wander, but all were relieved when the rocky outlines of Gibraltar rose on the horizon. When the Mary Celeste arrived in port, she brought no answers, only more questions, and the eyes of the world. In Gibraltar, authorities greeted the story with suspicion. A seaworthy ship, found adrift, its cargo intact, crew and passengers vanished? The British Vice Admiralty Court began a hearing. Captain Morehouse and his men were scrutinized. Some believed they had murdered the crew to steal the cargo, but there was no proof, no blood, no signs of foul play. The ship's log ended normally. The weather had been fair, the crew experienced, and the captain, by all accounts, gentle and devout. No one could explain it. The court awarded salvage, less than expected, because of lingering doubt. But the mystery of the Mary Celeste was now alive in the public's imagination, and it would never let go. 10 souls were on board the Mary Celeste when she left New York. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 experienced crewmen, each with their own stories, their own reasons for sailing. And then, nothing. Gone. No final words. No message in a bottle. No sails on the horizon. They were simply a missing. The lifeboat, too, had vanished, but no wreckage of it ever washed ashore. No bodies ever floated into port. No survivor ever stepped forward. It was as though the sea had opened her hand and closed it again without a trace. In the weeks that followed, newspapers filled with speculation. Was it pirates? Mutiny? A sudden squall? Was it illness? Delirium? Something supernatural? People clung to theories like lifebuoys in dark water. Some imagined Captain Briggs had faked his death and started a new life in Spain. Others believed sea monsters or ghosts or whispers from the deep had drawn them away. But none of it fit. Briggs was a devoted man, a father, a husband, a captain whose Bible was always nearby. He wouldn't leave his ship without good reason. But what was it? The Mary Celeste had been carrying barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial grade, foul-smelling, toxic. Some barrels were found to be leaking vapors, not enough to explode, but perhaps enough to create fear. Could the crew have panicked, imagining the fumes might ignite? Had they rushed to the lifeboat, thinking the ship would soon burn? And if so, why not return when the explosion never came? Why abandon a floating home in favor of a small boat on an unforgiving sea? It was a theory that made some sense, but only some. The ocean doesn't always answer. It just listens. Others whispered of darker things. Mutiny, violence, a sudden betrayal among trusted men. But there were no signs of struggle, no weapons drawn, no bloodstains. The cabins were in order, the crew's belongings untouched, the logbook calmly written. There was no hint of rebellion in the captain's final words. Still, the idea lingered, because silence is unsettling, and the unknown, more so. If something happened, whatever it was, it left no footprint, only absence, and that absence was louder than anything else. There is a kind of memory that the sea holds close, tight-lipped, unforgiving, vast beyond our understanding. Some believed the Mary Celeste was simply claimed by that old, unknowable force, that she passed into some moment of strangeness, a sudden waterspout, a rogue wave, a magnetic anomaly, something rare, something wild, something that doesn't leave marks on maps or skin. Perhaps the crew tried to wait it out. Perhaps the lifeboat was a last resort, and the sea simply swallowed the rest. No villain, no crime, just water, wind, and fate, and the ghost ship sailing on. In the days that followed, many who had known Captain Briggs came forward to speak of him. They described a man of honor, a quiet presence, a captain who earned respect without raising his voice. He read his Bible each morning at sea, wrote daily in his logbook with a steady hand, treated his crew with fairness, and his family with tenderness. To those who knew him, the idea that Briggs had abandoned ship for no reason or harmed his own family was impossible. He was a sailor of principle, not prone to fear, not the sort to surrender to superstition or panic. And so the questions only deepened. If such a man made the choice to leave his ship, then something must have driven him to it, something we still don't understand. Among the most haunting elements of the tale was the presence of Sarah Briggs and her daughter. Sarah, quiet and strong, had followed her husband across oceans before. This voyage was to be their family adventure, a chance for Sophia to see the world by sea. In the cabin, her possessions were still folded neatly. A child's dress lay tucked beneath a pillow. A small hairbrush rested on a shelf. The marks of a life still in motion, interrupted, but not disturbed. There were no signs of fear, no signs of haste, and that made it worse. To imagine a mother cradling her child in a lifeboat on the open sea, watching the ship drift away into fog, is a vision too quiet, too terrible. And yet,
Noreki, no trace.
only the hush of the sea. The missing lifeboat was a mystery in itself. It had been large enough to carry all aboard, but not built for survival on open waters for more than a day or two. There were no oars found drifting.
No tourn cambes washed shore.
No lifeboat ever matched its description. No port ever reported one arriving. No survivor ever came forward. It was as if the boat had simply slipped into mist, vanished like breath on a mirror. Some said they saw an empty dinghy weeks later, far off the Azores, but nothing came of it. And the sea moved on, uninterested, unburdened. In Gibraltar, the locals were uneasy. Some spoke of curses, of spirits at sea, of ships that leave and never return. The Mary Celeste sat moored in the harbor, quiet as a cathedral, while rumors swirled like gulls overhead. Some refused to go near her. Dockworkers avoided her shadow. One sailor claimed he heard footsteps echoing below deck at night. Another swore the ship groaned in protest when the tide shifted. But no evidence of crime was ever found. No one was charged. No new leads emerged. And still, the ship waited, not for justice, not for closure, but for wind. In time, the Mary Celeste was released, declared seaworthy, free to sail once more. She changed hands, found new captains, carried new cargo, but she was never the same. Sailors whispered about her, avoided signing on. Her name became a curse, spoken only in hushed tones between mugs of grog in dark corners of harbors. She was no longer a ship. She was a story, an echo, and as she sailed again, this time empty of mystery, but full of legend, the world never truly let her go. She had become more than timber and sail. She had become a question that no tide could answer. As the mystery spread, so did suspicion. Some wondered quietly if money had played a part. Could Captain Briggs have staged the abandonment? Left the ship adrift to collect insurance through some unseen hand? But the math never added up. The cargo was insured, yes, but not extravagantly. There was no financial motive, no missing fortune, and Briggs was no schemer. He was known for his honesty, his simplicity. Sabotage, then?
A rival's chipe?
A secret enemy? But again, no signs of tampering. No footprints but their own. Just a silence that grew deeper the more it was questioned. The Mary Celeste began to gather a reputation, not of fame, but of dread. Stories from her past resurfaced. How her first captain had died suddenly, how earlier voyages had been troubled. She was built in Nova Scotia under a different name, Amazon. But after several accidents, she was sold, repaired, and renamed. And sailors, superstitious as they are, say a renamed ship never truly forgets its first name. They said she carried something beneath her decks, not a ghost, but a weight, an omen. And once the Briggs family vanished, that weight became a shadow that followed her wherever she sailed. Sleep did not come easy to the men who had once stepped aboard her. Some of the Dei Grazia crew spoke years later of dreams, of long corridors on ships that had no end, of hearing a baby's cry from the waves. They spoke of walking through fog that never lifted, of glimpses, shapes, figures at the edge of their vision. Was it guilt, imagination, or something left behind? One sailor said he dreamt of a lifeboat floating endlessly beneath the moon, with no oars, no sail, and no stars above. Just the sound of lullabies, carried on the wind. Despite her history, the Mary Celeste continued to sail. She passed from owner to owner. None kept her long. One voyage was plagued by storms, another by strange illnesses. One captain claimed he could never steer her true, as though she resisted his hand at the wheel. The crew grew superstitious. Some refused to board her. Others signed on in desperation, then vanished before departure. She carried dry goods, rum, machinery, but never again did she carry families. She had become a ship of cargo and silence, a hull of unanswered questions. One of her last cargoes was a shipment of cheap goods meant for Haiti, shoes, cat food, junk machinery. By then, she was no longer proud, no longer polished. Her wood was weathered, her sails patched, her name whispered like a warning in low, narrow ports. The man who owned her then had loaded the cargo himself, deliberately, some said, and poorly. When the ship ran aground off the coast of Haiti, he filed for insurance. It was the last voyage of the Mary Celeste, a quiet, clumsy end for a ship that had once been the center of the ocean's greatest question. But even run aground, she didn't let go of her story. When she struck the reef in 1885, the Mary Celeste settled into the rocks with a hollow groan. No lives were lost. No storm was to blame. She had simply drifted toward her end. The crew abandoned her without protest. The owner tried to salvage what he could, but there was little to recover. Local fishermen found the wreck and picked through her remains. She lay like a broken skeleton beneath the shallow waves. But no one forgot her name. Even after the tides buried her hull in silt and coral, her name carried on the wind, not as wreckage, but as a riddle. Decades later, a handful of pages were found from what may have been a private journal, water-damaged, nearly illegible. Some believe they belonged to Captain Briggs. Others think they were forgeries. They spoke of strange lights at sea, of compass needles spinning without reason, of hearing singing, far off in the distance where no ship should have been. The pages stopped suddenly.
No signature. No farewell.
Just a closing line. We wait for morning, but no light comes. They were tucked in a crate found in a warehouse thousands of miles from Gibraltar. How they got there, no one knows. Writers, artists, and storytellers took hold of the tale. The Mary Celeste became a ghost ship in novels, in plays, in whispered tales told around lanterns. Her name appeared in maritime records, in court files, and finally, in dreams. She was reimagined 100 times, each version stranger than the last. In one, the crew vanished into another dimension. In another, they were victims of alien abduction. Some said a sea creature took them, others that they joined a colony of lost sailors on a hidden island. But in each version, one thing remained. The ship returned, but the people never did. Why do we return to stories like this? Is it the thrill, the fear, or is it something quieter, a yearning to understand what cannot be known? The Mary Celeste asks no questions aloud. She simply sits in our history, a gap in the timeline, an unfinished sentence. She reminds us that the sea is vast and full of endings that are not truly endings. The mystery doesn't demand a solution. It asks us to be still, to imagine, to wonder, and then to rest. The name Mary Celeste has drifted through generations. She appears in quiet corners of libraries, on the lips of night shift radio hosts, in grainy documentaries watched at midnight. And always, she carries the same feeling, that chill, that hush, that sense that someone, somewhere, knows more than they say. But the truth, like the lifeboat, never returned. Only the story did. And so we keep it, like a candle left burning on a windowsill, for travelers who never came home. There's an old saying among sailors: the ocean doesn't speak. It listens and remembers. If the sea saw what happened to the Mary Celeste crew, it has never told. No wreckage floated up. No letters drifted to shore. No ghostly figures appeared on distant beaches. And perhaps that's the point. Some stories are not told. They are held by the tide, by time, by the hush between waves. The mystery changed those who knew her. Survivors from the day Grazia rarely spoke of the discovery again. Even after awards were issued and articles written, they went quiet. Their eyes distant, their words careful. It was not fame they had found. It was something else, something colder, something that brushed against their skin and left their dreams uneasy. The Mary Celeste had passed through their lives, but she had left a silence behind her. And silence is heavier than it seems. Some of the missing crew had families, sons and daughters, wives and sisters. They waited. Letters were sent, clothes kept folded, rooms left untouched for months, sometimes years. Some believed the crew might still return, that a delay had occurred, a storm, a detour. But time passed, the wind changed, and the loved ones left with only absence began to understand. The sea does not give back what it keeps. Soon, the tale took on the shape of folklore. Fishermen in Portugal told of a glowing ship sailing with no crew. Islanders near the Azores spoke of hearing a woman's voice carried on the wind after sundown. And in the West Indies, children were warned not to stray too close to the water's edge, for the ghost ship might come, searching for replacements. These stories were not facts. They weren't meant to be. They were echoes, soft warnings from one generation to the next. One of the most famous retellings came decades later. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, before he created Sherlock Holmes, penned a fictionalized account of the Mary Celeste. He changed names, added mutiny, murder, mystery. The story took off, so much so that many believed it to be true. And though Doyle later clarified, the line between fact and fiction was already blurred. And that blur was part of the magic. The tale grew not because it was complete, but because it wasn't. In 1892, a lighthouse keeper on Santa Maria reported something strange. Late at night, in a thick fog, he saw a sailing ship drifting silently past the reef.
No lanterns.
No crew visible.
No flag.
Just the low groan of wooden beams and the snap of canvas in windless air. By the time the fog lifted, nothing remained. He didn't speak of it for years. But when he did, he called the ship by a name he said he'd never heard before. Mary Celeste. Ghost ships aren't always lost. Sometimes they return. The Mary Celeste was no mirage, no trick of the horizon. She was real, and that's what made her terrifying. She was found, tangible, touchable, and yet those aboard her had vanished more completely than if they'd gone down with her. She left no crater in the water, no scar in the wood, only a quiet, only the uneasy feeling that we are not always meant to know. The Mary Celeste teaches not in answers but in drifting. She reminds us that control is an illusion, that even the best prepared, the most devout, the most experienced, can be humbled by stillness. Sometimes the scariest thing is not a storm, but the calm that follows it. When the sky clears, and the water stills, and the ship is empty, and the world just keeps going. No matter how far you travel, the sea remembers. It holds the names of those who once sailed it, whispers them in its tides. It remembers Captain Briggs, Sarah, Sophia, the 7 men who vanished with nothing but a lifeboat and a legend behind them. It remembers the moment when wood met water and silence began. The ocean is not cruel. It is not kind. It is only deep and patient and full of stories. And now the Mary Celeste rests beneath coral and time, somewhere near Haiti. What remains of her is silent. No sails, no wheel, no voice, just the soft creak of history settling into sand. And yet, as long as her story is told, she sails still, not on waves, but in minds, in late-night whispers, in moonlit quiet. She drifts now in your thoughts, not to be solved, but to be remembered. Some say the ocean calls to us, not with words, but with something deeper, a feeling, a longing, a low, constant hum in the quiet places of our minds. The Mary Celeste answered that call and became a part of it. She is no longer wood and rope. She is the space between waves, the stillness beneath the surface, the whisper behind the wind. The compass on the Mary Celeste was one of the few instruments left behind. Still, unmoving, pointing north. But what use is direction when the path has disappeared? What comfort is north when the crew has gone missing? The compass remains, a symbol of guidance or futility. Sometimes the answer isn't where you're going. Sometimes it's that you were there at all. The ship's logbook ended abruptly. A final note, a heading, nothing unusual.
No panique. No farewell.
The log stops as if the world simply paused and forgot to resume. And so we're left not with a final chapter, but with a gap. The kind of silence you don't hear until the world goes quiet. There are always those who search.
Maritime historian.
Writers, sailors, dreamers. They study weather patterns, read court documents, trace nautical charts. They dig for facts as if the answer lies in ink and paper. But the sea doesn't live in paper. It lives in motion, in memory, in the long breath between certainty and surrender. If ships could speak, what would the Mary Celeste say? Would she whisper of peaceful days at sea? Would she cry out in confusion, wondering why she was left alone? Or would she simply hum, content to drift, carrying the weight of unanswered questions? Maybe ships don't want to be solved. Maybe they, too, wish to be remembered not for their end, but for their presence. We are taught to seek answers, to fill gaps, solve puzzles, name every shadow. But there is beauty in the unknown, peace in the not knowing. The Mary Celeste reminds us that not all stories are meant to be explained. Some are meant to be felt, held, and then let go like a breath on a sleeping tide. Perhaps in another life, the Mary Celeste made it to Genoa. Captain Briggs stepped onto dry land. Sarah held Sophia close. The crew unloaded the barrels, laughed in the sun, walked the docks as bells rang in the distance. Maybe the mystery never happened. And maybe that's the version that lives in some corner of the sea that we cannot find, but which finds us in our dreams. There are always those left behind. On the shore, by the fire, at the edge of sleep, they wait for ships that do not return. They hold onto names long after the waves have taken them. But in the stillness, in the hush of early morning, you can almost hear them, those who wait and those who are waited for, calling out to each other across the water. You've followed the Mary Celeste through fog and silence, through loss and wonder. Now the story lives not in the ocean, but in you. She drifts in your breath, in the space between your thoughts, in that quiet place where sleep begins to bloom. She is not solved. She is not lost. She simply is, like the tide, like your dreams. The Mary Celeste sat in silence long after the last footstep faded from her deck. Her sails flapped like slow breaths in the windless air. Each creak of her wooden bones was a whisper, but she never truly spoke of what she had seen. She was towed back to shore, examined, questioned, poked, and prodded. Yet all she offered were fragments: an open hatch, a soaked logbook,
A cargo untouched.
a crew never found, and still she floated. Even in the bustle of the harbor, with voices shouting and tools clanking, she remained quiet, as if protecting a secret not meant for land-bound ears. She belonged to the sea, and to the sea she remained loyal. Imagine the Mary Celeste now, years after her final voyage. The ocean changed around her, but in small corners of sailor memory, her name stayed afloat like driftwood in calm water. An old man in a seaside pub might tap his pipe against the windowsill and say, "I once saw her at anchor, quiet as a church, felt like she was listening to the tide." Another might add, I heard her bell ring once, though there was no wind." These weren't claims. They weren't stories, not exactly. They were fragments like sea glass, bits and pieces smoothed over time, carried from place to place in the pockets of memory. No one knew what truly happened aboard the Mary Celeste. But everyone, it seemed, remembered the feeling she left behind. The sea holds onto what we cannot. She swallows truth like rain. She weaves mystery into the waves. And sometimes, late at night, in the quiet stretch between midnight and morning, that mystery surfaces, not to be solved, but to be felt. The Mary Celeste drifts there still, somewhere just beyond the horizon of knowing. In the mind, in the dark, in the fog without end, there's comfort in not knowing. There's peace in questions that never press for answers, because the sea doesn't shout, she sings, and the song of the Mary Celeste is one long, drifting note, fading gently into sleep. There are those who say that Captain Benjamin Briggs returns, not in ghostly form, but in dreams. They see him at the helm in their sleep, standing tall in the moonlight, calm, silent, watching the stars. His eyes are kind, his hands are steady, and though the sea around him is vast, he is not lost. In these dreams, the Mary Celeste is whole again. The crew is there, working, laughing softly, sharing stories beneath the lanterns. His wife Sarah leans on the railing, watching the phosphorescence dance in the waves. Their daughter plays with a scrap of rope, singing to herself. It is not a dream of tragedy. It is a dream of return, of something that went missing, finding its way home, if only for a night. Imagine the sea without stars, a smooth, endless void of dark water and darker sky. Now place the Mary Celeste there, not as a ghost, not as a relic, but as a memory so soft it floats. Her sails are lowered. Her anchor is dropped. The waves do not rock her. The wind does not stir her. She is at rest. Whatever happened, happened. And what remains is quiet. The kind of quiet that rocks you slowly towards sleep. The kind of quiet where questions loosen their grip. The kind of quiet where even a ship with no crew can still carry you through the night. And so we leave her, the Mary Celeste, not in fear, but in reverence. A vessel that belonged not just to the sea, but to the spaces between questions, to the hush that follows a story, to the dreams we carry into the dark. You may find her again, in another dream, another tide, or you may let her go, floating gently beyond the mind's horizon. She'll be there, always just ahead, always softly rocking. Sleep comes in waves, after all, and this was only the first. Good night, traveler, and may your voyage be as quiet as hers. And now our journey comes to a close. The sails have been lowered. The stars have shifted. The story rests, curled gently around your thoughts like a wave folding into itself. And as you drift, not to solve but to surrender, know that you have sailed through a mystery not with urgency, but with stillness. And in that stillness, a kind of peace, the Mary Celeste is no longer alone. She has been remembered, and gently, you carry her with you. You've been listening to Midnight Archives, where questions are welcome and answers are optional. Tonight, as you rest, let the story stay with you, not to puzzle over, but to dream through. If you enjoyed this quiet journey, consider subscribing and let another mystery find you when the moon is high. Until then, good night, sleep well, and may the sky always be kind to those who wander.